Good morning. We're going to talk about college readiness for all today, specifically looking at the Tennessee Promise effect on college enrollment, retention, and the achievement gap between economically disadvantaged students and non-economically disadvantaged students who for college readiness. I thought this was an appropriate quote to go along with what I've been studying. Um, from our former Secretary of Education, Richard Ripley. We are currently preparing students for jobs that don't exist using technologies that haven't been invented in order to solve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. So, what we're dealing with in public ed is the burden of teaching millennial students, many of whom come from uh, family situations that do not support the education system, and we're teaching them to do things that we don't even understand yet. So it's a definite uphill battle, especially when dealing with high poverty schools. So the review of literature on this started with the definition of college readiness. There are many different definitions out there. Um, the one that is most widely used are the ACT benchmarks that have been defined based on national norms for each of the four subjects tested on the ACT. So that's the one that I will stick with in my research. Also, I looked at a lot of different types of disaggregated data with regard to college readiness and found that there was a, a definite discrepancy for economically disadvantaged to not meet the college readiness benchmarks. There's also data showing that minority students are less likely to meet the college readiness benchmarks, um, but the evidence showed that the actual indicator is poverty, not race or ethnicity. I thought that was very interesting. And one study that I looked over in my review of literature showed that ethnicity is not a predictor of college retention, so that a student who is a minority who enrolls in college is just as likely to stay in college as a student who is not a minority. So I thought that was very interesting and decided to direct my research toward just the economically disadvantaged population. So if we want to look at the actual ACT benchmarks, for English, it is a score of 18. Reading, which is a predictor of social studies readiness, the benchmark is 21. Math, it is 22. And science, it is 24. These benchmarks were established in 2010 with a large national norming uh, project done by ACT. So the methodology for my research is I decided to choose one high school to be the subject of the study, and it's a rural Tennessee high school. Um, and the data that will be used it's all quantitative data, um, and it will be ex post facto, meaning it will be data that has already been um, established from students who have either graduated or will graduate. Now, I'm going to look at three different groups of students, starting with the class of 2014, the class of 2015, and the class of 2016. Of these different groups, the class of 2015 was the first group that he had the opportunity to receive the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. So comparing the class of 2014's college readiness and college enrollment to the class of 2015, hopefully will be telling to show how the Tennessee Promise impacted college enrollment and potentially college readiness as well. And then I will add the class of 2016 to that when the information is available as well. Free and reduced lunch eligibility will be used to identify economically disadvantaged students. These guidelines are determined by the USDA and the State Department of Tennessee. The disaggregated ACT data will compare the achievement of economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged students, and the college enrollment statistics will also be compared for these two subgroups. So when we think about how Tennessee Promise could impact college enrollment, just a quick review of what it is. It's a scholarship and a mentoring program created to eliminate certain barriers students have when seeking post-secondary enrollment. It's a last dollar scholarship, which means it covers tuition not already covered by a Pell Grant, the Hope Scholarship, which is a lottery funded scholarship for students with a 3.0 GPA or higher, or state student assistance funds. So it doesn't cover things outside of school tuition and fees. Students cannot use it to buy books or pay for living expenses while they're in college. It's not just financial assistance, though. It also provides a mentor and requires community service. And the thought process behind that is that many students aren't missing out on college just because of finances. It's because they don't have adequate support or information to know how to be a successful college student. So, theoretically, the mentoring aspect of the Tennessee Promise will help with that. So, the question is, will the Tennessee Promise increase college enrollment statistics? Also, will the Tennessee Promise decrease the achievement gap between economically disadvantaged students and non-economically disadvantaged students? One theory is that simply learning that a student has an opportunity to attend college with the Tennessee Promise scholarship could change their preparation for the ACT. And maybe that will help improve that achievement gap or decrease that achievement gap for this subgroup. A student who doesn't intend to go to college may not put their best effort toward making a good score on the ACT. So that'll be interesting to see as well. So here's a sample achievement gap calculation on the ACT English test. If 103 students tested and 57% of them were economically disadvantaged, we can see how the economically disadvantaged students did compared to the non-economically disadvantaged students. So with the college benchmark for English being 18, out of our 103 students, 34 met that benchmark, which is 33%. So if we disaggregate that between economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged students, you can see from this sample calculation that 14 economically disadvantaged students met the benchmark and 20 non-economically disadvantaged students met the benchmark. This is clearly a big achievement gap for these students. We had more economically disadvantaged students taking the test, but fewer economically disadvantaged students met the benchmark. So if you look at the 23.7% of economically disadvantaged students meeting the benchmark and 45.5% of the non-economically disadvantaged students meeting the benchmark, you can calculate the achievement gap simply by subtracting the ED students from the non-ED students' percentages. So that achievement gap would be 21.8%. Now, ideally, that gap is zero. We want our economically disadvantaged students to be as high achieving as the non-economically disadvantaged students. But we need to think about achievable goals for that, so that will come later. So to summarize this research, the primary goal for public ed should be to prepare all students for post-secondary success. We know that college and career-ready graduates are more likely to go on to become contributing members of society, and that will provide exponential economic benefits to our communities and to the nation. It is evident from the presented research and literature review that students who live in poverty typically have greater barriers to success in post-secondary atmospheres than students who do not live in poverty. So strategies to reduce the achievement gaps for economically disadvantaged students should be explored to work toward evening the playing field for this population to truly achieve college readiness for all. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?